Wherever in the world you're joining us from today, welcome and thank you. I'm Graham Cookson, OHG's Chief Executive, and I'm pleased to be hosting today's Insights and Reflections webinar. In 2024, OHG events have reached almost 3,500 people and covered a diverse range of topics, including prevention, drug shortages, green healthcare, the future of NICE, innovative payment models, and the efficiency of primary care. The focus of today's webinar is reflections on 2024, and will highlight emerging and critical themes for research and policy in 2025 as well. You will hear from four of my amazing colleagues. Opening our presentations is Matthew Napier, who will summarise two of our important pieces of work on the causes and consequences of drug shortages. Next up is Simon Brazel, and he will pick up on our long-standing and wide-ranging research on vaccines. Then Lotte Stoughton will showcase our work on the broader elements of value that can be incorporated and should be incorporated into health technology assessment. And finally, Charlotte Ashton will illustrate the ways in which we're ensuring our research has the most impact globally, from our collaboration with the BMJ and our global network of partners and events. At the end, I will share some thoughts on what I think will be hot topics in 2025. Before we get going, I have a small favour to ask. From our viewing figures, we know that you find our webinars interesting, but we would love to get more detailed feedback so that we can continue to enhance our offering, as well as know what you'd like to hear from in 2025. So at the end of the webinar, please hold on for 2 minutes to complete our survey. In the Handouts tab of the webinar platform, you will find all of the OHG reports and research referred to in today's webinar. In addition, all of our OHG reports are freely downloadable and accessible on our website, ohg.org, at any time. So now it's time to look back on the best research in 2024, and I will hand over to Matthew Napier.
Thanks, Graham. Hi, I'm Matthew Napier. I'm an economist at the OHG. Today, I'm going to be reflecting on the research into drug shortages that OHG have been conducting in 2024. And I hope today that I can answer the question on the screen. What are the key drivers of drug shortages and the impacts on patients and health systems? I'll start by giving just a little bit of background into the topic. So drug shortages have become much more of like a critical topic in recent years, and particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw massive global supply chain issues. Drug shortages can affect many different therapeutic areas and lead to significant consequences to patients and health systems. The causes of drug shortages are often interlinked and multifactorial, but can generally be categorized, but not necessarily limited to, three broad categories. So these are supply chain issues, manufacturing problems, and spikes in demand for treatments. And to just give some examples of these, so on more of the supply side, you could see a shortage of an active pharmaceutical ingredient, an API, which could lead to a shortage of a medicine, and on the demand side, a spike in demand for a medicine, potentially due to a higher rate of seasonal illness. In 2024, OHG have been very active in the drug shortages research. So in January 2024, we published an investigation into the dynamics of drug shortages, and this was to really understand some of the key drivers and causes of drug shortages. In September 2024, we published a follow-on piece of research into the cost of drug shortages, and this is to try and explore some of the significant consequences to society of drug shortages. And following both report launches, we hosted a webinar where we convened experts from academia, industry, and government to attempt to gain further insight from these diverse perspectives. So I'll first run through some of the key findings from our first study into the dynamics of drug shortages. So as I touched on earlier, drug shortages have become a more critical topic, and this is likely because they've become more commonplace and appear to be lasting longer, particularly in the United States. They occur in many different therapeutic areas, but our research highlighted that the shortages can often be concentrated in the generic and biosimilar markets, and we saw that over 95% of reported drug shortages in the US and Canada were in generic and biosimilar markets. And as I touched on earlier, the causes are interlinked, multifactorial, and often the root cause can be difficult to identify, but in this research, we observed strong links between low prices and low profitability for off-patent medicines, and we observed this link increasing the risk of drug shortages. So I'll just go on to talk about a couple of these points in the next slides. The figure on the right-hand side of this graph, of this slide here, helps to demonstrate the connection between off-patent medicine shortages and prices. The top half of the diagram shows a healthy market competition with a number of competitors, leading to prices falling in that market. Because of the high number of competitors, there's a low likelihood of shortages occurring due to the increased capacity to cope with supply and demand issues. However, in markets where price erosion is occurring, as you can see on the bottom half of the diagram, competitors leave the market due to low prices and low profitability and low margins, and this leads to a high likelihood of shortages due to few competitors, and if a supply issue or a demand issue occurs, there are potentially issues with not coping or meeting demand, patient demand. I'm now going to talk about our second piece of research into the cost of drug shortages. So here on the slide, we have some of the key findings from the paper. Drug shortages can place a substantial burden on different stakeholders. This impact and disruption caused by drug shortages occurs through three key routes. These are price increases, additional healthcare resource use, and patient health impact. We found that no drug shortage is the same, with the case study showing how they can differ in magnitude across settings and by who is impacted most. So I'll first go and talk about the evidence-based framework. So there's three elements that I just introduced on the previous slide: the price increase of drugs, additional healthcare resource use, and health impact to patients. So starting with the price increase of drugs, this accounts for both the increased cost of switching to higher cost alternatives, as well as the increase of the price of the drug itself in shortage. So these were things that were seen and discussed in the literature. Secondly, we have the additional healthcare resource use. This accounts for the time costs associated with managing drug shortages, particularly for pharmacists who may have to adjust inventories, identify alternative treatment options, or alter their purchasing practices. But this is not just limited to pharmacists, but is often one of the stakeholders most effective. And then thirdly, there are the health impacts to patients, and these are due to a drug shortage, and they may be due to prescribing errors, adverse events, side effects, switching to less effective substitute drugs, or the delaying of treatment, which can lead to real and often significant impact to patients. And then following on from the development of this framework, we applied it to 3 case studies, and this generally we selected 3 case studies to demonstrate the potential scale as well as the source of some of these costs. And generally we wanted to ensure that the treatments would represented different applications, patient populations, and market dynamics to see how different drug shortages may lead to different impacts. The first case study was into trastuzumab. We found that the drug shortages, a drug shortage of this type would primarily manifest itself as health losses, and this would be a result of patients receiving a less effective previous standard of care. And as a consequence, patients would be the stakeholder most impacted by a shortage of this type. In the US, we estimated this could range from approximately $283 million to $269 million. And in the EU, a slightly smaller cost, but this could range from 4.8 million euros to 129 million euros. So very large numbers. But yeah, and this also demonstrates how it can differ across settings. The next case study that we explored was into a shortage of a statin. Unlike the trastuzumab case studies, all patients, we assumed, were able to switch to an alternative statin product. This is because there are many therapeutically equivalent available alternative statins on the market. Therefore, we thought it was fair to make this assumption that patients who were receiving a statin were switched onto another one. This meant that no health losses occurred in this hypothesized shortage. However, in the US, we still see a very large impact, and this was driven by the increased price of drugs and also the cost of switching to these alternative statins. Whereas in the EU, this effect of price increase was not seen in the literature, and therefore we did not apply this in this case study. We predict that the additional healthcare resource use was the only factor that was an impact of the statin shortage and was a major component of the cost. As you can see, the cost at the bottom showed how significant a statin shortage would be, and this is in large part driven to the huge population size of patients receiving statins. So in the US, this could range anywhere from $728 million to $3.04 billion US. In the EU, still a very significant cost, and this could range anywhere from 66 million euros to 275 million euros. Overall, the cost of the health system is a major impact of this drug shortage, and this is, as I alluded to, due to the huge scale of statin use across the health system. The third and final case study was into saline. Disruption in saline production has become very commonplace over recent years, and this is due to it having a very highly vulnerable supply chain. This is due to a high market concentration in saline production, characterized by very few suppliers, but who are supplying a large degree of the market. This means there's a high risk that any disruption, for example, a hurricane, which has been seen in the past, leads to a critical supply shortage, and this means that prices rise and hospitals ration, and this effect has been seen lots in the literature. However, due to the wide-reaching impacts and the broad use of saline across different elements of hospital care, we weren't able to estimate a precise figure. However, we expect this to be significantly high due to the large patient population associated and the high use of saline. To summarize, drug shortages can occur due to many factors on both the supply and demand side. However, we observe very strong links between low prices in generic and biosimilar markets and drug shortages, and we believe this may be a key underlying cause of many drug shortages. Particularly the cost of drug shortage research has demonstrated how drug shortages can have very significant impacts on patients and health systems, and how no drug shortage is the same, and they can differ significantly in magnitude across settings and by who is impacted most. It's essential that policymakers evaluate the control of expenditure of generic and biosimilar medicines against the consequences and the risk of these costly drug shortages. A full consideration of this trade-off is essential, and we believe will help promote sustainable, resilient supply chains, and this will benefit all stakeholders and society as a whole. Thank you very much. I will be handing over to Simon Brazel on a talk on vaccines.
Welcome to a short overview of a selection of OHE's work that relates to immunization. The OHE team worked on multiple immunization-related projects in 2024. However, within the next few minutes, I would like to highlight two of them. Earlier in this year, we published a report that quantified the socio-economic burden of cervical cancer in the UK. And then a bit later, mid-year, we published our study on the socio-economic value of adult immunization that took a much more global view. Cervical cancer is the fourth most common cancer among women globally, and over 95% of cervical cancer cases are caused by human papillomavirus, or short HPV. However, thanks to effective vaccination against HPV, as well as screening and treatment, it is considered a preventable disease. In 2020, the World Health Organization announced its goal of eliminating cervical cancer by the end of the 21st century. Then, in November 23, NHS England announced a much more ambitious commitment to achieve elimination by 2040. While this is a welcome commitment by NHS England, the current incidence of cervical cancer in the UK is more than twice the WHO elimination target of 4 cases per 100,000 women. Therefore, a UK-wide prevention strategy is needed to ensure momentum towards achieving elimination and realize a significant socio-economic benefit for patients and their support systems, the NHS, and the wider society. To inform this strategy, our report provides quantitative evidence of the socio-economic burden of cervical cancer in the UK and the potential socio-economic savings from reaching the WHO elimination target. This was done based on a literature review informed framework that aggregates the socio-economic costs into 3 components, namely costs that accrue to the healthcare system, societal costs, and costs to individuals. The team found that cervical cancer is associated with a lifetime cost of almost £210,000. This value includes costs to the healthcare system, individual patients, and the wider society due to cervical cancer morbidity and mortality. The individual level burden is driven by the loss of workplace productivity, which accounts for 63% of the total costs. This loss of informal care provided by women as a result of premature death makes up 22% of the total cost. Healthcare system costs and caregiver productivity losses are the next largest cost components and are of similar magnitude, each accounting for 8% of the burden, followed by out-of-pocket patient costs. At a current UK incidence rate of 9.7 per 100,000 people, the socio-economic population level burden of cervical cancer in the UK is estimated at 691 million. This is equivalent to approximately 40% of the UK's combined spending on immunization and early detection programs pre-COVID, or equivalently to about 8% of the total UK pre-COVID-19 spending on preventative care. At the target WHO elimination incidence rate, the estimated burden is 285 million. The preventable burden is defined as the difference between the socio-economic costs at the current incidence rates of cervical cancer and the WHO elimination target, which is equivalent to about 406 million. This means that 59% of the current socio-economic burden of cervical cancer is preventable. This report strongly highlights significant future socio-economic savings that the elimination of cervical cancer can yield. To reach the UK's ambition, it is crucial for this aspiration to be reinforced by the implementation of an action plan with measurable actions and milestones from the NHS, and that both the commitment to elimination and the plan will be needed to adopt in the other UK nations. The second project I would like to highlight this year was our report on socio-economic value of adult immunization programs. Over the past 2 years, we looked at 4 immunization programs against pneumococcal disease, influenza, RSV, and herpes zoster. We looked across 10 countries, spanning across North and South America, from Europe to Africa to Asia and Australia. And we worked within 2 work streams. In one stream of work, we conducted a qualitative analysis by undertaking a literature review of the evidence base related to the broader value elements of each program in each country. In a second workstream, we then performed a benefit-cost analysis to estimate the value that those 4 adult immunization programs generate to the wider society. Within our literature review, we found that there is ample literature describing the value of vaccination, especially within those narrow value elements such as impacts on mortality and morbidity or cost offsets to the health system, which are often assessed in health technology assessment. However, our research also shows that many broader elements of value are currently underrepresented in the academic literature, and this absence of evidence is not to be confused with evidence for absence of the value itself. Without such evidence, the value of immunization programs is likely to be underestimated by policy and decision makers, risking suboptimal investment decisions. Our benefit cost analysis showed that those countries which already implemented the 4 programs or are currently rolling them out are likely to generate vast amounts of societal value that outweighs the related costs of running those programs multiple times. The average benefit cost ratio across these countries and programs ranges between $5 and $19 per $1 spent, depending on the monetization approach of non-monetary outcomes. Our research therefore shows that adult vaccination is a compelling investment that delivers returns through cost savings for healthcare systems and the generation of wider tangible and intangible economic benefits. Do we think that the single number like 19 is the final answer? Likely not. As in every research, there's a wide variation between programs, countries, and monetization approaches. However, what is much more important is that 95% of the estimates are all greater than 1, meaning the created societal value outweighs the program's running costs in almost all of the different valuation scenarios. From this research, we derive 3 key recommendations for decision makers. First, we need to adopt a prevention-first mindset. Now more than ever, healthcare systems must invest in strategies to cope with unprecedented and growing demand. Prevention must be at the center, and robust immunization programs are a fundamental component of effective prevention. Second, we need to implement and optimize robust adult immunization programs. The burden of vaccine-preventable diseases is projected to rise. Given the favorable benefit-cost results presented, expanding access to a broader adult population can generate more value and higher net cost savings for healthcare systems and society. Adult immunization programs also present an opportunity to help our societies age well and sustainably long into the future while delivering an excellent return on investment. And third, we need to expand and develop the evidence base for the value of adult immunization programs. There are significant gaps in the evidence base regarding the broader elements of the value of immunization programs, indicating a critical need for further research. Across all our immunization projects, the OHE team was busy spreading the word around the world. We presented our work to policymakers, decision makers, and budget holders in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and in Asia. In 2025, we are looking forward to produce further evidence, data, and insights to pave the way for cost-effective immunization programs around the globe. I thank you for your attention, and I now am happy to hand over to Lotte Steuten, who will talk about the broader value in HTA.
Thanks, Simon. So I will be talking today a little bit about what is broader value and why should we care more about that than health technology assessment. My name is Lotte Steuten. I'm Deputy Chief Executive at the OHE. So to start us off, what does broader value recognition in HTA mean? This is a concept that was first developed by OHE in 2016 and later on widely published on by organizations like ISPOR, etc. And they presented this in the form of a value flower. And as you can see, the value flower on this slide has a number of petals, and the orange ones are the typical value elements that are included in most health technology assessments around the world. So they will consider the health and/or quality of life impacts on patients, as well as cost to the healthcare system. In addition, some HTA organizations will consider productivity impact on patients and care providers and other family spillovers. So those are the 2 blue petals that you see. But these are not commonly and not consistently included. And then in addition, 8 and sometimes more additional value elements are recognized and identified that because they can have a potential important impact on HTA assessments. And just some examples of these could be how severe a certain condition is, or also the impact that a new intervention might have on equity. We also see that this value flower continues to be expanded, and that work is ongoing to understand how we can better measure and value some of these additional value elements. So now we know what broader value kind of entails, and have seen some examples of that. But a real important question is, before we start doing that, is broader even better? Well, most health economists would agree that the broad societal perspective broadens the value assessment to include indirect impacts, like we said, productivity and caregiving, and also, for example, environmental effects, and it does that so that it can enhance resource allocation by prioritizing not only these interventions that bring good cost effectiveness to patients and healthcare systems, but that also maximize societal welfare and potentially provide a high societal return on healthcare investments. And this is important because this view aligns better with public preferences and broader government goals like equity, economic growth, sustainability, and therefore they make HTA decisions more responsive to societal needs. And this would also signal important innovation by rewarding the treatments that also provide those relevant broader benefits. But it's also important to sort of keep in mind that there's potentially some overlap between some of those battles, and unless a broader value perspective is implemented rigorously, there may also be a lack of suitable data and or potential double counting of these value elements. So if we agree that broader is better, then the next question is, can we actually do it? And for a long time, people have argued that it might be too difficult to measure some of these broader value elements. But is broader perspective really still beyond our capabilities? And I think the answer is no. There have been many methodological advances in this field, and some of the examples you see here on this slide, including some of OHE's and others around the world. And also quite recently, another paper came out talking about how to do generalized cost effectiveness assessments in a broader sense. So we know it's potentially better, we know we can do it, but why should we care more about broader value today? And there's, to me, three overarching reasons why that is the case. First of all, because no patient is an island. And what I mean with that, if we look at demographic changes in Europe, an aging population, increased prevalence of chronic diseases such as dementia and other long-term conditions that require intensive care and quite often by caregivers, family members. And there's an economic impact of caregiving as well. It affects labor force participation, can lead to significant indirect costs for caregivers, lost income, reduced productivity, but also mental and physical health strains. And incorporating caregiver impacts into HTA would ensure that these costs are not overlooked. And that is particularly relevant when healthcare policies aim to reduce institutional care and promote home-based care. A second reason is the societal priorities. Research really indicates that the public values improvements in caregiving quality of life and other societal impacts beyond patient outcomes. And HTA frameworks that would align more closer with these societal preferences are more likely to gain public trust and support. Then the second bucket. The future of health is personal, it's digital, and it must be more equitable. Advances in personalized and potential transformative technologies such as ATMPs, but also health technologies, they share the potential to generate substantial broader value in and outside of the healthcare system. And within the healthcare system, one can think of value of hope, scientific spillovers, and impact on healthcare capacity beyond the margin. Outside the healthcare system, you can think again about productivity of patients and caregivers. And considering this will help more equitable access to life-changing therapies for rare diseases as well as underserved populations. And then the third one, go broad or go bust. EU economies are stagnating and low productivity is a major concern, and that's only aggravated by our aging population. And therefore considering broader socio-economic value aspects such as productivity is not a nice to have. By considering these broader value elements in HTA, the EU can improve its global competitiveness by demonstrating leadership in innovative health assessment frameworks. And that would send a clear signal to developers that investments in technologies with wide-ranging societal benefits can be rewarded. And that is particularly important for fostering innovation in complex fields like digital therapeutics and also gene therapies. However, if we look around the world, we see that the healthcare perspective dominates. Some broader value elements are considered, mostly in sensitivity analysis, but not in the base case analysis. And the top three that are most frequently mentioned are productivity, equity, and family spillovers. There's also some mention of disease severity, adherence improving factors, impact on social services, and transportation costs, but virtually no recognition of healthcare capacity and environmental impact yet. Also, I would say we have to mind the gap between guidelines and practice. While guidelines may mention some of these broader value elements, that doesn't mean that they're actually used all that often in health technology assessment. And then I would like to talk a little bit about an elephant in the room, the EU Joint Clinical Assessment. This is intended to harmonize how clinical assessment is done within the EU member states and having a streamlined process for that, whereas each individual state would still do the health technology assessment or cost effectiveness analysis in the same way as they've done this before. So considering this, would the EU Joint Clinical Assessment potentially eat the value flower? And I think in the short term, it might. It will likely slow down the move towards broader value assessment because it focuses narrowly on clinical effectiveness and because it takes up much of the bandwidth of all stakeholders, including HTA agencies, manufacturers, etc., that are involved in this EU joint clinical assessment. In the longer term, if the JCA would evolve to include broader societal perspective, or if it would free up resources for national HTA bodies to focus on these elements, it could potentially speed up incorporation of some of these elements. But at this point, I think it requires a glass half full mindset to really predict that that will happen anytime soon. However, if you look a little bit further afield, at least from where I am in the UK today, then we see there's an increasing interest in broader value perspectives around the world. And one of the very exciting projects we're working on at OHE is to think about how we could potentially broaden the value recognition in HTA in 11 countries in the APAC region. So we're working there together with experts of all these countries to think about what would be some broader value elements that are most relevant to them and what would be practical steps to take forward to make sure that these are considered in a rigorous and informative way as part of HTA. And finally, we also see that the methods development is still ongoing. Very recently, an international group of health technology assessment agencies, including experts like us at OHE, will work together on topics related to health economic methods that could include non-traditional ways of evaluating value and cost-effectiveness analysis. And I think this is really exciting. In many conversations we've had with people around the world, we see that there is an interest in these broader societal perspectives and a shared need to sort of think about how we can work together to sort of consider these more consistently in a rigorous way in health technology assessment. So if you would allow me to make one wish for 2025, then it is that sort of health economists and all the stakeholders involved in this come together and be brave and try to consider these broader value elements for better health technology assessment in the years to come. And on that note, I wish you happy holidays. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Lottie. As ever, that was fantastic. And I'm really pleased now to be taking this back a little bit from the projects that you've heard about from my colleagues this afternoon and looking at the ways in which we're translating this into impact and moving it beyond the direct research projects, looking at the importance of OHE, of our work, but also of the discipline more widely. So I'm Charlotte Ashton and I'm Director of External Affairs. So why does this really matter and why are we focusing on this? Well, health economics and outcomes research has informed healthcare decisions for decades now. It looks at the value of treatments, of interventions, of services, and evaluates these based on the kind of costs, outcomes, impacts. But many of you know this already. And the value of this will never go away. But what we need to start thinking about is how we communicate this and use this to our advantage and to the world's advantage more broadly. So this year we've been working with BMJ Impact Analytics, and fantastically we've come across some great data that shows exactly how useful our research at OHE is. I was actually really taken aback by the stat that they shared with us to begin with that said that less than 6% of research globally goes on to be cited in policy and healthcare guidelines. Staggeringly, at OHE, this figure is far higher at 27% of our research outputs being cited in these policy guidelines globally. And on the screen now, you can see just a few of those places around the world that our research to date has been published in and some of the guidelines it's being picked up in. And why this matters is really because often we lose sight of the broader goals of our research and why they matter and who they're influencing. And so being able to step back and look at these outcomes is really helpful for us, just to make sure that we are positioning both ourselves as an organisation, but also the wider research that we're doing in the right context and talking to the right people globally. So just an example, this takes a report that was published in 2011 of my former colleagues at OHE. Initially, the report was cited by 10 policy documents in 3 different countries. Since then, it's gone on to inform a further 109 policies across 17 countries. And all of those little dots demonstrate some of the organisations that have picked this research up and used it in their policies or guidelines around the world. So that's people like the World Trade Organization, Chatham House, OECD, and the UN as well. So it's really important for us to know this, because then we can work out how we best talk about this in a more public space, but also in a more policy friendly way. So how do we translate the research that we're developing into usable guidelines and also usable recommendations, as we're seeing a lot of conversation around now in the sector. Moving on, I think what's been really useful for us at OHE this year in particular is forming partnerships with some of these organisations, again to kind of help them better understand where this research is playing a role, but also how they can use it in the ways in which they're influencing policymakers around the world. So this year we launched the Change Initiative, and as you may have heard before, it's a programme that's addressing critical health challenges around the world through the lens of a kind of multi-sector approach. We're trying to bring the partners that we work with together already, people from across the pharmaceutical sector, from across the multilateral or foundation side of things, but also across civil society and academia, into the same room to talk about the same issues at the same time. So we're not repeating ourselves, but we're also kind of collectively finding some solutions to these. So on the screen now is just some examples of the organisations that we've partnered with or formed alliances with this year, and then some of the work that we've done with World Economic Forum in particular about how to translate the use of health economics into some of these kind of critical areas like the climate and healthcare challenge that we're all facing and sadly will only get worse. Building on this, I think one of the main features of OHE's work is our ability to kind of look at what's coming next and to find the innovative approaches, the agile ways of working. And so one of the greatest examples of this of the last few years has been the launch of our Innovation Policy Prize. We launched this 2 years ago in 2022, and this year is its second year of running, and we're really pleased that this year we have focused on how economic policies can incentivise environmentally sustainable innovation in the life sciences sector. It's free for everybody to enter and open to absolutely anyone of any profession or level of career. And really for us, it's about trying to find something truly innovative in around the world. And for us, the winner is then awarded £40,000. And I'm very pleased to say that on the 28th of January next year, we will be celebrating the winner of this Innovation Policy Prize in London. So please do check out our website for more details on how you can attend in person and enjoy the drinks reception afterwards with us. So moving on from innovation and from one event to a series of others, in 2024, the team were kept really busy by travelling around the world, both virtually and in person, to many of these countries on the map. And we were asked both to present at a lot of these forums, but also we held our own workshops, seminars, and roundtables. And this is just a kind of screenshot or a snapshot of some of the events that we took part in this year. So you can see again, it's a really diverse group of organisations, ways of working, but also of disciplines coming together. Some of them, like ISPOR, HTAI, are really focused on very familiar topics for us. We're surrounded by colleagues and experts in similar fields to ours, but some of these are also wider and really challenge us to, again, take our research and make sure that it is accessible and useful for different audiences. So organisations like the World Health Organization, the Global Sustainable Development Congress, and also UK Parliament. So we're really pleased, again, to kind of be challenging the ways in which we work and the ways in which we present our research and data to ensure that it's having impact beyond OHE and the partners that have commissioned it. So finally, this brings me on to the fantastic impact flower that Lottie, my colleague, championed this year at ISPOR. I'm thrilled really to be talking about it because I think it represents just some of the people that as a sector, as a discipline, we need to be prioritising and talking to alongside the audiences and people that we already are in conversation with. So for me, the blue and the grey, I think, are really familiar audiences for many of us. They are often our clients, our partners, those who inform our research and guide it as well. And those greener buds on the flower are those where perhaps we're already in conversation with these partners, but we need to make better connections with them or to better explain or bring our work to their door. And others are really quite new, both to the discipline and to OHE, and are those that we want to prioritise going forward, making sure that the value of health economics is really understood. It really is to make all of this as well more intentional so that we're aware of who we're trying to talk to and when we need to talk to them. And so this is really something that will be guiding our work and hopefully the work of many others in the discipline as we move forward. So I'm done there, but I just wanted to leave you with the words of my colleague Lottie. And I hope that after today's Insights and Reflections webinar from OHE and my colleagues, you'll be inspired to go away and let 1,000 impact flowers bloom. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for that fascinating review. The last time Trump was in the Oval Office, he pushed forward ideas for international reference pricing. So what will a second Trump presidency mean for drug pricing policy in the US and beyond, especially with the additional wildcard of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at HHS? From current rhetoric, healthcare does not appear to be high on Trump's agenda, but we may see some movement later on in his term. I would speculate that the desire to lower taxes and constrain government spending may lead to some cuts to Medicaid. I could also see tweaks to the IRA, in particular the provisions to align small molecules and biologics, but perhaps unfortunately to make them shorter. There may also be attempts to look again at net price transparency or bring back reference pricing in the context of trade disputes and Trump's favourite word, tariffs. And there is an outside risk, and I stress an unlikely outcome, that RFK Jr. will revise childhood immunisation schedules or take issue with the FDA. As the world's largest drug market and the driver of so much pharmaceutical innovation, whatever happens in the US is likely to have ripple effects around the world. Talking of innovation, a long-term policy debate exists around the balance of long-term dynamic efficiency in innovation, so those long-term incentives to innovate and invest, and balancing those with short-term issues of affordability and access, so-called static efficiency. In 2024, we have some researchers picking up on the issue of the optimal share of surplus from pharmaceutical innovation, and OHE have started to contribute to this topic. How should the slice of the innovation pie be cut up, and what is the right balance between static efficiency and dynamic efficiency? That's something that we think will become a hot topic in 2025. And finally, in this section, I expect the work on innovative pricing models to continue. At the one end of the innovation spectrum, we have new disease-modifying treatments for dementia, which is a huge population and an old population. And at the other end of the spectrum, we see new treatments such as cell and gene therapies for ultra-orphan indications that will affect very small and potentially very young population. So very diverse treatments, but both will need innovative solutions to the pricing problems that they face and how to tackle uncertainty in outcomes. In many respects, they share overlapping challenges, but also therefore overlapping solutions. We might also see work in the innovative pricing model space in relation to indication-based therapies and also combination therapies. OHE has a very long history of contributing to the development of novel methods in value assessment, including the famous value flower. A key question Lotte Stoughton and colleagues are considering is whether the new EU joint clinical assessment will kill the value flower or make it bloom. Right now, the answer is as complex as European HTA itself. In the short term, the JCA's clinical focus might slow the spread of the adoption of broader value elements, things like productivity, care or quality of life, and disease severity. But in the long term, if there is a push for integration or the use of any potentially freed up resources, the JCA could cultivate a thriving garden of value flowers. Will 2025 see a vibrant and vigorous flower bloom? OHE will certainly be contributing to ideas and methods in this space. Now, I think I've done that metaphor to death, but on a related topic, we believe that a key theme will be how to incorporate spillover effects into value assessment. OHE will be continuing our work in this area on care burden and benefits. As an example, but a very good example, are the effective treatments for dementia. And as they become available, there will be a significant benefit in terms of carer benefits that would unlock significant economic and social benefits and must be included in the value of those products in terms of HTA. More broadly, we expect HTA methods to continue to evolve, or at least for this to be a significant debate among academics and policymakers alike. For example, in the UK around severity modifiers, but around the world in terms of generalized cost effectiveness analysis. Maybe not in 2025, but in the near future, let's hope that patient-reported outcomes will be the norm and that the voices of patients will shape decisions in a meaningful way. However, this will require more work on both appropriate methods, but also how to do this regularly and at scale. OHE will also be part of the Health Economics Methods Advisory Group, a new independent group of health technology agencies from England, the US and Canada, who will work together to develop recommendations on adopting novel health economic methods to support decision-making by healthcare systems. HEMA will also consider the need for modifications to current methods, the uncertainty in the application of new methods, and suggestions for further research. But can we really expect global collaboration in HTA methods? Europe may have figured out EU-level alignment of clinical assessments, but aligning on HTA, let alone in a global sense, is very unlikely. After all, HTA isn't just about health, it's about politics, economics, and occasionally who has the best ideas. And one thing that won't change is the debate around cost-effectiveness thresholds. My final, but perhaps most important pick for hot topics in 2025 is the greening of the life sciences sector. We expect that interest in this will continue. We are already seeing that interconnectedness of human and planetary health continue to drive research funders' agendas, and OHE is part of several large research grants looking at different aspects of this issue. There are stark predictions that soon the environment will be the largest single cause of loss of human health. So we need much more research on the dual or bidirectional relationship between these, if only to help improve value assessment and improve decision-making in the near future. Now, this may be controversial, but in the very short term, I expect that there will be an interest into research, into measure whether and to what extent people are willing to pay or trade off for environmentally sustainable healthcare or pharmaceutical products. And as I said previously, HTA methods will continue to evolve, and there will be a live debate about how to revise methods and approaches. Part of this conversation must include new methods for assessing and rewarding sustainable technologies that will emerge in the next few years. Now, we're far from having rigorous and standardized approaches to this, and there will be problems for making fair comparisons with current standards of care. But this is a critical avenue of research, and health economist researchers must look at this, and it will be of great interest to OHE. In summary, perhaps my hot picks are not emerging topics, but perhaps a fairer representation is they're emerging topics that will pick up momentum in 2025. So to bring us to a close, I would like to thank all of my colleagues for sharing their work with us today, and to you, our audience, for joining us. As a not-for-profit charity, OHE is committed to ensuring our research is in the public domain, and that our leading health economics insight helps inform and educate policymakers, academics, and industry on the most critical health policy issues of the day. From shaping new and existing methodologies in health economics, such as the assessment of broader elements of value, to understanding the impact and drivers of drug shortages around the world, we hope that you found our work in 2024 to be informative and valuable. And as a reminder, you can find all of our research and insight on our website at ohe.org. If you're interested in working with OHE as a project sponsor or as a research collaborator, please get in touch. Our contact details are on our website. Again, one final plea to please complete the feedback survey. It really does matter to us what you think. That's a wrap on our review of 2024 and our picks for hot topics this year. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again at OHE events throughout 2025.